Hi, and welcome to VERTEX 104, Content and Compositing. My name's Ingmar, and in this class I'll show you how to import content into VERTEX, how to navigate the Playback Editor window, what content versioning is about, and how it can help you to swap out content items on the fly. We'll talk about various video codecs and how to transcode media, as well as gain an understanding of how to handle various frame rates or FPS. I'll explain to you what we call the VERTEX Matryoshka principle of nesting one piece of content into a clip and then into a clip container. Then we'll go through some video compositing basics and talk about cues and transitions. Now, due to the complex nature and my in-depth presentation of these topics, I decided to split up this class into two parts of roughly 20 minutes each. All right, let's dig right in. All right, let's start with adding our first content asset from VERTEX's library. Go to the Content tab to find a great deal of sample content that is shipped out with every VERTEX installer, which can be added to the project with a double click, a right click, or per drag and drop. I'm going to right click on that sync test video and add it to my project. Let's take a look at the Project Explorer again to make sure that the content item has been added. And you'll notice a little orange progress bar indicating how VERTEX processes and prepares the content asset to be used in our project. Said processing includes the creation of proxy files, waveform files, thumbnails. Let's take a look at the project folder to see what has been added. Go to Main Menu, File, and select Open Project folder. Open the Data folder and the Content folder. Notice how VERTEX has given our content item this cryptic ID. Let's take a look at the files created by opening that last folder too. Next to the PNG file for waveform display, we'll find an audio file as VERTEX converts all imported audio to a proprietary format, which of course can be adjusted in the project settings. By default, the actual source file of our content item remains in its original location and is not added to the project folder. Instead, we'll find some thumbnails that help us to locate the content when working in our project, and of course a proxy file in a lower resolution that, if needed, will reduce the processing load when previewing our content in the render editor. Let's go back to VERTEX and add that content to our timeline. We can just go to the Project Explorer, click on the content item, drag and drop it over here to create a clip container in our Playback Editor window. And when I click on the playhead and drag it across the timeline, you see how the counter position changes accordingly. As soon as we drag the playhead into our clip container, VERTEX starts the real-time rendering of its content immediately. The Render Editor window in the middle of the user interface gives us a preview of what's being rendered, and if we want to see what our content looks like on the main outputs, we can start the full-screen renderer with the keyboard shortcut Ctrl+F, which is the same shortcut that takes us back to the UI. So this is what is being processed in the render pipeline right now. Notice how the image is much sharper in full resolution in contrast to what is being displayed in the preview renderer. And that's due to the fact that the image here is scaled down. And I'm sure you all know that downscaling equals pixelation artifacts. And if you're like me and can't get enough of that kinky pixelation stuff, I suggest you engage the proxy mode. That will use the generated proxy file at a much lower resolution, which gives our preview that fantastic retro 80s look, while at the same time VERTEX is delivering a sharp image in full resolution through the main outputs. And I want you guys to understand that VERTEX renders our content in full screen and preview separately. This means also that any secondary render editor window increases the processing load. So anything to save some processing resources, right? Navigation of the Playback Editor is pretty straightforward. I can toggle play and pause by pressing the space key on my keyboard as an alternative to clicking the transport controls over here. If you want to mute the audio monitoring on your laptop speakers, you can click on the little loudspeaker icon in the bottom right corner. Hovering your mouse pointer over that region accesses a VU meter for a visual monitoring of your audio signals even when it's muted. One thing worth mentioning in regards to the transport controls is the stop command, which might be a source of misunderstanding to some of you. You see, if I click it, the stop button really resets the playhead and the counter back to 0 instead of just pausing the playback. What may seem a peculiar distinction between stop and pause to some video operators, yet is the industry standard in many tape machines and transport controls of lighting consoles. You can move the playhead across the timeline with the help of your keyboard's arrow keys. And if you want to jump precisely to the next edit point, like the beginning of our clip container, use the Alt key in combination with the right arrow. And voila, we're right at the beginning. And if I press Alt and the right arrow again, the playhead jumps to the end of our clip container. To take a closer look at my edit points, I can use the zoom slider over here. There is, however, a much more efficient alternative to that by holding down the Control key and using your mouse wheel to zoom in and out like so. Also, you can quickly scroll to left and right if you click down your mouse wheel and drag it across the ruler grid of the timeline. To quickly zoom out all the way, click on the Reset Zoom button over here, or use the button next to it to focus the zoom onto the selected clip container. On this zoom level, we can see the audio waveform that VERTEX created earlier during our content import, which allows for precise editing based on the audio part of our content. Clicking onto various points in the timeline allows us to seek through the video. I want to switch off the proxy mode real quick to get a clearer image in the render editor window. All right, and if I start the playback right now, you see that the now pointer is in danger of running out of our view. To remedy this, we can either enable the auto scroll function over here, or click on the button, let me pause the playback, or click on the button right next to it to focus the view to the current playback position. Please be advised that VERTEX's auto-scroll function adds to the overall processing load, so keep that in mind when working on projects that demand a high performance from your hardware. Another quick navigational shortcut is to double-click onto the counter, and once it's highlighted blue, you can use your keyboard to enter the exact time where you want the playhead to go to. For instance, if I want to go back right into my clip container, I'll punch in 2 minutes, 50 seconds, and 0 frames, and confirm with Enter. Where'd the playhead go? Oh, wait a minute, I have auto scroll disabled. So I'm going to click on Scroll to Playhead, and voila, playhead is back in view. Okay, the next feature of VERTEX I want to show you is content versioning. What is it for? Well, let's say you're at the production site, your VERTEX project is neatly running your programmed show, and in the last minute the director decides to pull your video because the customer has updated their logo. Luckily, the solution for that is pretty easy. Right-click on the content item that needs a new version and select Import New Version from the context menu. Next, locate and open the new media file you want instead from the Windows File Explorer window, which is the same window that pops up when importing your own content non-resident in VERTEX's sample content library. The drop-down menu in the lower right corner lists all the possible file formats that VERTEX can process, and I recommend you familiarize yourself with that list. But anyway, I'm going to select my updated logo with a double click or by clicking on Open, and VERTEX immediately updates the clip container, the render editor, and the content item in the Project Explorer. Select to inspect, and you'll find in the main category of the inspector the versioning properties. Open the drop-down menu to get a list view of all the available versions that can be selected by clicking on the little checkboxes to toggle between versions and have them rendered right away. When inspecting a content item, you'll find its video codec in the main category under Format. Keep in mind that VERTEX renders all of this in real time, and our sync test video was encoded in H.264, which is sadly not ideal for live playback and real-time rendering. Luckily, there's a quick fix for that with VERTEX's transcoding feature. Right-click on the project item and select Transcode from the context menu. The transcode settings in the dialog window offer various presets for HAP, ProRes, and WebM codecs. HAP video is generally better for real-time applications like VERTEX due to its GPU-based decompression, whereas ProRes relies much more on a performance CPU. There is an export option of transcoding just the video and video only. And you have the choice of importing the transcoded video as a new content version or a new content item altogether. I'm going to go with the new version to keep the list of my content short and achieve a better clarity in my Project Explorer's overview. The FPS dropdown allows me to transcode to a different frame rate from the original. Even the funkiest NTSC frame rates are also considered. I'm going to keep the original and confirm with OK. Notice how the Project Explorer's content tile runs the orange progress bar twice, first for the transcoding process itself and a second time for the import process. And once all the waveform files and proxy files have been generated, the transcoded video becomes available in the content versioning dropdown. Remember that VERTEX's transcode tool comes with every installer as a standalone app to be used by content creators for preparation of their media files. Content items in the Project Explorer display not only the duration but also the FPS here at the bottom. And while our sync test video was shot at 25 frames per second, VERTEX itself renders at about 60 frames per second. Click on the heartbeat button to display the statistics in the render editor, and it shows the current frame rate in the top left of this window. This quick diagnostics tool should be your first step when troubleshooting performance issues. To illustrate how VERTEX handles different frame rates, I'm going to go to the library and import another AV sync test, but this time in a frame rate of 60p. Go back to the Project Explorer and make sure it got imported and wait for the orange progress bar. I'm going to hold down the Control key and use my mouse wheel to zoom out a little to get a better view of my entire sequence for lining up the two videos so that the burnt-in timecode and the playback counter are matching in frames and seconds. The first content item at 25 frames per second goes to exactly 1 minute. And I can drag the second video at 60p and notice how the orange snapping handles appear, allowing me to perfectly align it to minute number 2. If I click onto the timeline to seek into the first clip container, you will notice how the burnt-in timecode of the 25 FPS video matches the playback's transport counter exactly to the frame. This is because my sequence, on which the content is arranged, is also running at 25p. That way I can seek to any position of my content and have every frame of my video in sync with the sequence's playback time. Now let's take a look at the mismatch of a 60 FPS video in a 25 FPS sequence. While the playhead is positioned at 3 seconds and 23 frames, the burnt-in timecode of my 60 FPS video says we're at frame 55. Seeking through the timeline with my left and right arrow keys moves the playhead to any of my sequence's 25 frames per second. But 1 frame over here equals 2.4 frames in my actual media, which I therefore cannot edit accurately unless I fix the frame rate mismatch. To change the sequence's default frame rate of 25 FPS, select it to inspect it and go to the playback time category in the inspector. Here we can also adjust the length of the sequence and its frame rate. I'm going to click into the value field and type in the frame rate matching my 60 FPS video. Notice how the timeline grid immediately got a much finer resolution by adding 35 frames to the second. Let's zoom in all the way to get a closer look. Notice how the playhead retained its position from the previous FPS and is now located between 2 frames. And this is the perfect example why we should avoid a frame rate mismatch. Here, please take a look at another project's timeline where the frame rate mismatch resulted in the clip container not ending accurately on the frame. And when trying to line up 2 containers in this scenario, it will lead to involuntary gaps or overlaps in the media arrangement. If I now move the playhead with my arrow keys, everything is perfectly in sync. Alright, let's sum this up. Generally, try to avoid a frame rate mismatch between content and sequence. And if you need to adjust the sequence's FPS, be aware that any pre-existing time-based events like clip containers or cues might not be frame accurate after that change. Alright, let's wrap up part 1 of this class by showing you some more options to import your content. A right-click on the Content Manager in the Project Explorer, which allows you not only to add single content files, but also image sequences or whole directories of content. And here we'll find also the submenu to add generative content, like text content, solid color, test patterns, masks, QR codes even. This list can also be accessed through the Create menu under Content. There is also a keyboard shortcut by pressing Ctrl-I, which opens the File Explorer window right away. Instead of clicking any file to open, I'm going to cancel and show you a much more efficient way of importing your content right into VERTEX. For clarity's sake, I'm going to do it from the library, but you can do it from the File Explorer window just as well. Here, I can take any content that's supposed to be imported, for instance, this beautiful E.C. Escher-like VERTEX logo, and drag it onto the timeline. And in doing so, VERTEX automatically combines 3 actions into one stroke, namely importing content, creating a clip container, and positioning it onto the timeline. Along the same lines is the following workflow. I'm going to zoom out a little. Let's say the director of our show asks us to quickly drop some content at minute 4 onto our timeline. I'll quickly type in the timecode into our counter, so the playhead's right on time, and then I can just take some content from the library and drop it right onto my canvas in the Render Editor window. Now, in addition to the aforementioned combined action, VERTEX has also created a second track on my timeline, but more on tracks later in part 2. At this point in my class, students usually scream, "Help us, Professor Pixelator, we've accidentally uploaded some private videos from last night's after-show party. How do we delete them?" Well, don't you fret. Just right-click on, for instance, this second content at 60 FPS, and click on the trash icon in the context menu. And that will successfully get rid of all the evidence from your project file. However, the content data in your project folder might still be there. So go to Tools and select Content Cleanup, and here you'll find an option to delete all removed content files from your disks. Alright, let's move on to the last import workflow and try adding a whole directory or folder via the context menu. I'm going to select some audio test content. And not only does VERTEX batch import every file from that directory, no, it also creates a collection folder with the directory's name. Content collections allow you to stay organized when sorting your various content assets. Expanding the tree view of the Content Manager shows me not only the collections, but also categorizes every content asset into its type. Let me fast forward to a view where I've already imported various types of content. You see, now I can distinctly browse my assets or search for just audio, images, or videos separately. Alright, class, that's a wrap for part 1 of VERTEX 104. Thanks for staying tuned. I know it's a lot to take in. That's why I divided this class into 2 parts. To be continued in the next installment.